When I was 17, my parents took me on a trip they called my life, but I never came back. They left me all alone in a country I had never been to before, with nothing but a note that said, "You're 17. You're old enough to survive." My name is Emily, and it all happened when I was 17. My parents took me to Greece, telling me it would be a new beginning. I was struggling a lot, I was bad at math, I was constantly getting into drama with girls at school, and I skipped more classes than I attended. My mom dismissed it all, telling everyone I was just going through a phase. My dad rarely intervened. To be honest, he barely spoke. So when they surprised me with 2 plane tickets and told me there would be just the 3 of us, no siblings, no jobs, I let myself believe it. I wanted to believe that this was their way of reaching out, of trying to fix things. Maybe, just maybe, they really wanted to start over. The first few days were a little awkward, but there was a glimmer of hope. We ate ice cream on the waterfront, wandered through ancient ruins that didn't interest me, and took cheesy, smiling photos for Facebook. I even remember my mom holding my hand while we waited for the ferry to Santorini. I thought, maybe this is true. Maybe we're really trying. Then morning came, and everything changed. We had to catch our flight back to the States. We ate breakfast together in the hotel cafeteria. My mom had her bright coral lipstick, the shade she saved for special occasions. My dad silently sipped his black coffee, staring at the newspaper he hadn't bothered to flip through. Right before we were supposed to leave, my mom leaned over and said, "We're just going down the street for souvenirs. Be back in 15. I barely glanced up. I was glued to my phone, texting my best friend who kept asking how family bonding boot camp was going. But 15 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. 4. I started to panic. I asked the hotel staff if they'd seen my parents, and the front desk clerk gave me a confused look before saying, "Oh, the couple from room 302? They already checked out earlier this morning." When I ran back, I pushed the door open with the help of the staff. My suitcase was gone. I wasn't even there. My messages didn't go through, crying until a stranger came up and gently asked if I was okay. The next morning, still reeling from panic, I went to the U.S. Embassy, wearing a tight bun and a navy jacket, and listened intently. After she had typed forever on her computer, she looked at me with that attentive, quiet expression and said, "Your return flight has been canceled. You are no longer listed on their insurance or emergency contact information." I am so sorry. That was the moment it really hit me, like an ice bath had crashed into my chest. They hadn't just left me behind. They had erased me. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deliberately excluded me. That night, I returned to the hotel lobby, desperately hoping that there would be something there, some clue, some explanation. But there was only one thing waiting for me in the pocket of my denim jacket, a small, folded piece of paper in my mother's handwriting. "You are 17 now, you are old enough to survive." That was it, just the word survive. No apology, no explanation, not even a hint of regret. Just one cold sentence that cut through me like glass. I curled up behind a row of scruffy bushes near a bakery, trying to hide, and sobbed until my chest ached and I couldn't catch my breath. I had no idea how to get back home, and honestly, I wasn't even sure I had a home anymore. Somewhere off in the distance, music floated through the air, probably from a nearby cafe. It sounded like a wedding, maybe. People were laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating. A real family, one that still cared about each other. I remember gripping my phone tightly in both hands, staring at the last picture we took together. My parents were smiling under this grand marble column, and I stood between them, wearing this forced half-smile. We looked like a normal family in that photo, but the cracks had been there all along. I just hadn't seen them until now. Much later, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place, memories that had seemed small at the time. A week before we left, I'd caught a glimpse of my dad sitting out on the porch, clutching a white envelope stamped with "Final Notice" in bright red ink. My mom had been pacing the kitchen, whispering into the phone like she didn't want to be overheard, except she was talking way too loud for it to be casual. And then there was that one night when they thought I was asleep. I remember hearing them argue. My mom's voice, sharp and angry, had said, "We can't take her with us. She'll ruin everything. She's not a kid anymore. She's barely hanging on, just like us." Back then, I wanted so badly to believe it was just stress, that maybe they were overwhelmed or going through something rough. But now, sitting alone in a country where not one person knew my name, I finally saw the truth. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't left me behind by accident. They had planned this. The first few nights I didn't sleep at all, at least, not in the way that gives you rest. I camped out behind that same bakery near the edge of town, huddled close to a metal trash bin that gave off just enough warmth to keep the cold from sinking all the way into my bones. I zipped my jacket up to my chin, wrapped my arms tight around my stomach, and listened to the sounds of early morning deliveries. Glass bottles clinked. Crates thudded against pavement. Men shouted to one another in Greek, a language I barely understood. I counted my breaths just to stop myself from crying. On the third morning, I got caught trying to steal a bread roll that had been left cooling on a tray outside the back door. My hands were numb, my lips cracked and dry, and I didn't even hear the footsteps until someone grabbed my wrist from behind. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. I expected yelling, maybe a call to the police, or worse, being deported. Instead, I looked up and met the eyes of an older woman. She had silver hair pulled back into a messy bun, flour dusted all over her apron, and a stare that felt like it could see straight through every lie I'd ever told. But she didn't scream or scold. All she said was, "If you're hungry, you work." Her name was Lucia. She was 68, had lived in the same apartment above that bakery for over 3 decades, and ran the place entirely on her own. She let me wash dishes in the back, mop floors, and haul heavy sacks of flour that I could barely carry. That first night, without any fuss, she handed me a folded blanket and pointed to a narrow cot in the storage room. No questions. No lectures. It wasn't much, not warm, not soft, but it was safe. And in that moment, safe was everything. Lucia never asked me about my family, and honestly, I think she didn't need to. She could probably guess. Days turned into weeks, and I slowly started picking up enough Greek to follow her basic instructions. Scrub this, lift that, knead here. I mirrored her every move, watching how she shaped dough or adjusted the oven without ever checking the dial. Sometimes, late at night, she would talk to me in quiet little sentences while wiping down the counters. One evening, while we were shaping loaves side by side, she glanced at my hands and said, "My daughter had hands like yours. Always smelled like yeast. Always too curious for her own good." I never asked what happened to her daughter, and she never said another word about her. But after that night, she started saving the ugly loaves, the ones too uneven or lumpy to sell. She'd wrap them in brown paper and leave them beside my cot like it was a secret ritual. Like maybe she understood that someone like me didn't need grand gestures, just small, quiet bits of kindness. One day, I found a cracked old laptop tossed behind a dumpster. I spent hours tinkering with it, using salvaged parts from a local repair shop. Eventually, I got it working well enough to connect to public Wi-Fi, and I signed up for a free online GED program. I studied in the back of the bakery, sitting next to this humming fridge that made everything vibrate. I did math homework while the air filled with cinnamon and roasted sesame. Every time I finished a quiz, I whispered my score to myself like it was a prayer. I kept the same jacket I'd been wearing the day my parents left me behind. Not because I wanted to, but because the note was still in the pocket, the one that said, "You're 17. Old enough to survive." Some nights, I'd pull out that crumpled note, just to remind myself I was still standing, that I was still here. It was like my own quiet protest against their words, proof that I hadn't let them break me. But the truth was, I wasn't exactly sure who I was without them. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't a student. Not really a citizen, either. I was just some girl scrubbing dishes in a country where no one knew my name. And yet, I was alive, The first time I earned money that didn't reek of yeast or elbow grease came from a place I barely understood: stocks. I'd come across this wrinkled old business journal left on a cafe table, and something about an article on a small Greek shipping company caught my attention. They were restructuring, apparently. I didn't know much, but I took a chance. I threw in the €200 I'd been saving to buy myself new shoes. 2 weeks later, it had tripled. That was the moment something cracked open inside me, not the world, just me. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was figuring out how to move, how to play in a world I hadn't been invited into. Lucia caught me one evening, laptop open on the tiny prep table, spreadsheets pulled up like some bootleg stockbroker. She smirked and said, "You playing accountant now?" I just shrugged, played it off like I was curious. But the truth? I was obsessed. I dove headfirst into every free resource I could find: YouTube finance lectures, translated threads on obscure forums, and even this janky PDF copy of Warren Buffett's essays I downloaded from some shady site. I read it 3 times in 1 week, scribbling notes on the backs of old flour-dusted receipts. His voice became my white noise, always there while I scrubbed pans or kneaded dough. I started taking bigger swings. Some investments flopped, sure. But others? They took off. By the time I was 20, I had actual clients. By 22, I had investors. I registered a small consulting company under a translated name, nothing fancy, just enough to look legit. Word spread slowly but steadily. I helped local vendors streamline their supply chains, offered digital investment tips to travelers, and even built a short course specifically for undocumented young people trying to create income streams online. I wanted them to feel like they had options, like they mattered. Lucia never once asked how much I was making. But she saw the changes. The new phone I got her for Christmas. The espresso machine I installed in the bakery without saying a word. The quiet way her gas bill disappeared 1 month. One afternoon, she glanced over at me and said, "You walk different now. Like you're not waiting for the sky to fall." I laughed. But she wasn't wrong. I started sending anonymous donations to youth shelters back in the States, especially ones in Florida. I told myself it was just giving back. But deep down, I think a part of me wanted them to see it. To wonder who was out there helping girls like me, the ones they didn't help. The ones they left. I never posted about my work, never used my full name. I didn't want attention. I wanted freedom. I wanted peace. A life that didn't have to justify itself to people who threw it away like nothing. And even with the money, even with the clients, even with the odd feeling of finally being respected, I still carried that girl from the bakery inside me. She was quieter now, but not gone. She came back to me in the dead of night, before a big decision. In the shaky moments when someone raised their voice too fast, and I still flinched. I wasn't healed, not fully. I was building. And when you build from ashes, you don't forget a single brick. You remember every scar it covers, every gap you filled with your own hands. So when the past came knocking, when I saw that familiar address show up in a foreclosure listing, I didn't hesitate. I booked a one-way flight home. It was Lucia who noticed it first. She was sitting at the kitchen table, glasses low on her nose, sipping coffee and flipping through a stack of old international newspapers someone had left behind. She didn't even glance up, just slid the paper across the table and tapped a tiny black box in the corner. "You recognize that address?" she asked. I looked down and froze. The street, the city, the zip code. I knew it. I remembered every number I'd ever memorized. The old mailbox, the creaky screen door, that cracked line in the driveway we were never supposed to step on. It was my parents' house in Florida, the one they bought after leaving me, the one they showed off online as their fresh start. Now it was in foreclosure. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. There's a strange feeling when life offers back the very thing it once took from you. It doesn't feel like winning, at least not right away. It feels like stillness, like the moment right before a storm hits. I didn't say anything to Lucia. I didn't have to. She understood, We flew to Florida under the guise of business. I used the name tied to my consulting firm, a clean, neutral alias I'd built over the years. The auction was held in the sun outside a county office building. The crowd was straight out of a Florida postcard, older men in pastel golf shirts, investors tapping on tablets, retired couples fanning themselves with brochures. Nobody paid us any attention. Lucia stood next to me, holding our bidder card. I leaned in and whispered the numbers, and she raised the card without hesitation, cool and steady, like it was just another errand. The bids climbed faster than we'd expected. Someone else had their eye on the house too, some man in khakis who kept squinting at us like we didn't belong. Lucia didn't blink. When the final number landed and the gavel fell, the auctioneer's voice echoed. Sold to bidder 173, she lowered the card. We didn't smile, didn't speak. We just stood there while the auction rolled on, and it sank in I now owned their house. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom with the window that faced the street. Every piece of the life they built without me was now legally mine. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel pride. What I felt was colder, something sharper. Control. A week later, they got the notice. Certified mail. Official language. 30 days. I imagined them staring at it, confused, trying to guess who had bought the house. They had no idea it was me, the daughter they left behind at 17. And I wasn't done. They requested a meeting. Their lawyer contacted Lucia, thinking she was the new owner, said they wanted to negotiate directly. I agreed. The meeting took place at a quiet real estate office on the outskirts of town. Neutral ground. Private. I showed up 10 minutes early, navy outfit, hair pulled back, sunglasses on. Not to hide, just to keep them guessing. They walked in 2 minutes late. My mother came first, wrapped in a beige cardigan and oversized sunglasses that screamed delicate. My father followed behind her, clutching a weathered leather folder like it could shield him. They didn't recognize me, at least not right away. They sat across from me, nodded politely, and waited. I didn't say anything, just slowly removed my sunglasses, and my mother's face went pale. Her mouth parted, like she was trying to speak but couldn't. My father blinked, looked down. Silence filled the space between us, tight and sharp. You left me, I said. In a foreign country. No money, no ID, no goodbye. Her hand twitched slightly. We thought maybe you'd hate us less if we just disappeared, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a second, I saw something honest in her eyes. Fear, maybe? Shame. But just as quickly it vanished. You were impossible to live with, she added. Always emotional, always fighting. We were drowning, and you were dragging us under. I nodded once, slow. You were supposed to be the life raft, I said. Not the ones who throw people overboard. My father still hadn't looked at me. Say something, I told him. Look me in the eye and say it wasn't your decision. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers tightened around the folder. Your mother thought. I don't care what she thought. I cut in. He flinched. You didn't even try to stop her, I said. You let her erase me. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I didn't think you'd make it. I stood up, steady as ever. Well, I did, I said. And now I own the house you live in. My mother blinked once. You're bluffing. I slid the signed deed across the table. Her hands hovered above it, shaking. Lucia stepped in from the hall, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. She gave a short nod toward them, calm, professional, detached. You'll need to hand over the keys within 30 days, she said. You'll receive the official move-out timeline tomorrow. My mother glanced between us like she was waking up from some kind of nightmare. You can't do this. We're your parents. I held her gaze. No, you were my parents. And you made your choice. She started crying. Not real tears, not at first. Just the same act I'd seen before, the helpless mother routine she used when things got uncomfortable. I didn't react. Lucia placed a small envelope in front of her. These are the legal instructions, she said. We suggest you read them carefully. My father still hadn't spoken. His eyes had gone glassy, lost. But I didn't feel sorry for him anymore. I turned to leave. Wait, my mother said. Why now? After all these years. I stopped at the doorway. Because I didn't need you to come back, I said. I just needed you to know I came back. And I walked out. They went online afterward. Posted lies about me. Called me ungrateful, manipulative. Claimed I showed up out of nowhere, took their house, broke their hearts. Said I'd been brainwashed. I didn't say a word in response. Lucia asked if I'd seen the posts. I had. Let them talk, I told her. I'm busy building something that matters. We renovated the house in 4 months. Gave it a fresh coat of paint. Ripped out the cracked kitchen tiles and laid down oak laminate. Took down all the old live, laugh, love junk and replaced it with shelves of books, framed photos, soft blankets on every chair. Their old bedroom? We turned it into a dorm room. 2 bunk beds. Clean mattresses. Lavender pillows. A lockbox for each girl's personal things. Lucia called it the second door. For the people whose first one never opened, she started teaching again. Baking classes every Wednesday. Her students were girls like me. Too young to live alone. Too old to belong to anyone. She showed them how to knead dough, how to trust their hands, how to mess up and still try again. We held our first open house in the spring. 6 girls came. 2 didn't say a word. 1 wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Another cried when we gave her a fresh pair of socks. Lucia just smiled. Let them breathe, she said. The rest comes later. That night, I stood in what used to be my parents' backyard. The air smelled like sugar and lemon soap. Inside, the porch light glowed gold. Someone was playing music from a cracked phone speaker. Laughter floated through the windows, real laughter, unfiltered and loud. Lucia came up beside me, a mug of tea in her hand. Still feel like you don't have a home? She asked. I looked around. There was light in every room. Shoes by the front door. A girl brushing her hair in the hallway mirror. Another curled on the couch, finally asleep. This isn't just a home, I said. It's where we start again. And if you think this part was wild, just wait until you hear what I said when they came begging for mercy. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, and let's get into the story of betrayal, survival, and the comeback they never saw coming.